We'd like to make a quick announcement on a sign web we've got going. Lynn, raise your hand and speak loud if you don't want to come up.
We are having a sign wave right out here on Market Street next Thursday afternoon from 4:30 to 6:30. And we will be out there with our Brannon signs and our t-shirts attracting attention. And also our Fire K. Hagen signs. You would not believe how many honks those Fire K. Hagen signs get. And it's really fun to go out there. We have a lot of good conversation. And it's really an ego boost to see that there are people that go by that know what we're talking about. So please come. We will have the signs. We'll have shirts to purchase if you'd like, or you can buy them today. You can come and do it even if you don't have a shirt. We still welcome everyone.
All right. Thanks, Lynn.
4:30 until 6:30. We're trying to hit rush hour traffic on Thursday. And actually, sorry to steal a couple more seconds.
Go ahead.
We are going to try to do it every other weekend. Every other week during some days rush hour traffic until the primary. We're going to do it in various places around town. We did it at Grassfield about 2 weeks ago. We're going to do here next Thursday, and we don't know where we're going to do next. But we're trying to educate the public in all of Greensboro.
Thanks, Lynn. So if you have more questions, you can contact Lynn or myself. Best way to contact us is a Facebook page. You know what the Facebook page address is?
All you have to do is look up Conservatives for Guilford County.
Conservatives for Guilford County. And both Lynn and myself are on there. And so we hope to see you here Sunday and also on Thursday. With that, thank you once again for coming. We'll get started here in the next few minutes. It looks like some folks are starting to arrive, so we'll get started here in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Yeah, if everybody would like to take a seat, we would love for all the seats to be filled, and I think we're about to get started. So thank y'all.
I've seen this man get today. We all just left CLC in Raleigh. Everybody just wowed over him. So, Senator, will you please come on up and talk to everybody? Thank you very much.
I just flew in from Washington last night, and I love your state, and I have to say it's great having just left Washington, D.C. to be back in America. I asked him just a moment ago how long I should speak, and he said, well, as long as you want. And I almost told him that's a very dangerous thing to say as a senator. Some of us have a nasty habit of talking for 21, 22 hours at a time. Just a few months ago, I stayed up all night with my friend Ted, as he was doing that. We kept ourselves entertained. We were the only ones who stayed throughout the whole night in that. And we kept ourselves entertained by swapping lengthy discourses on obscure parts of the Constitution. I was stunned when I would take out my phone from time to time, in open violation of the Senate rules, mind you, and checking Twitter, because I discovered there were a lot of people watching this stuff in the middle of the night, and I thought, America's in good hands, in the hands of people willing to stay up late listening to two boring guys talk about boring constitutional principles that are not boring to them because they understand our liberty. You know, we as Americans are so blessed. We're blessed to live in a land that I believe was always intended to be occupied by a free people. It was a land set aside for those who would cling to liberty and those who would be unwilling to accept tyranny. It's a land that had its formative years centuries ago when our national government was not based in a place called Washington, D.C., because there was no such place back then. It was based in London. And that government, that national government, had an awful tendency to tax us too much and to regulate us quite oppressively. And it was so far from where the American people were that it was so slow to respond to their needs. This caused a lot of frustration among the American people. So much so that in 1773, a group of American patriots boarded a ship in Boston Harbor. And they seized crates of English tea, and in symbolic protest against their London-based national government, you know, the one that taxed them too much, regulated them too much, and was slow to respond to their needs, they threw that tea into the water, destroying it. Now, this was a brave moment. This was a bold moment. But it was a moment that, had it stopped there, would have been something that would have resulted in, at most, a footnote in American history. What we now call the Boston Tea Party would not be heard of, would never be spoken of today, but for the fact that they didn't stop there. They weren't content simply to protest against the kind of government they did not want. They were determined to identify and embrace the kind of government they did want. And it took them some time, but over the next 14 years, they declared and then fought for and won their independence. And then after that, they got to Philadelphia, where they wrote down a list of principles in this document to identify the kind of government they did want. It took them 14 years to get from protest to embracing the kind of government they wanted. But they did it, and they did it right. And you know what? This is still the kind of government that we do want. In fact, most of the problems that we face today that relate to our government relate to our failure to abide by the concepts, the very simple principles in these documents. Now, this document protects us in two important ways. More than that, actually, but there are two really important parts of the Constitution that often get overlooked. The whole point of it is to restrict power, because our founding generation understood that when you've got too much power concentrated in the hands of the few, people suffer. Because human beings tend to abuse power if they remain unchecked in their power. And so they took two very significant steps to prevent the excessive accumulation of power in the hands of the few or in the hands of the one. They separated out power along two axes, vertically and horizontally. First, vertically, they said, you know, the potential for abuse of power is greatest among national governments because they can get bigger. And the bigger they get, the more powerful they become, the more money they demand. And as they get more money, they demand even more power, and then they demand more money, and they get more money, and then they exercise more power. And so they split up the power of government in the United States, making clear that most power would remain closest to the people, at the state and at the local level. I suspect most of you run into your state legislator from time to time, maybe at the grocery store, or at the ballpark, or at your child's ballet recital or piano recital. You're less likely to run into your U.S. senators and congressmen. And that's one of the many reasons why it's important for us to keep most of the power close to where you are, because you can turn that around. We've drifted from that principle over the last 75 years. And, you know, James Madison, at the time of the founding, wrote in Federalist 45 that The power in Washington could be described, the powers of Congress would be described as few and defined, and those reserved to the states and local governments could be described as numerous and indefinite. We've turned that completely around to where if Washington can imagine it, Washington can do it, Washington can regulate it. We regulate everything from how much water your toilet flushes, to what kind of light bulbs you can use, to how many grams of riboflavin have to be listed on the box of Cheerios in your breakfast table. There's too much regulation going on in Washington, and not enough from where you sit. And you know, this is a principle that is neither Democratic nor Republican. It's neither liberal nor conservative. It's simply American. More Americans would get more of what they want out of government, and less of what they don't want, if more government occurred at the local level. Now, if there are progressives among you, which, being as though we're at the county headquarters of the Republican Party, seems unlikely, but if there's anyone here who's a progressive, you too would stand to gain from a return to federalism, from this vertical separation of power. There are people in Vermont, for example, who really want a single-payer, government-run, government-funded healthcare system. Well, they could get there much faster, much more completely, if we left that sort of thing to states than they could ever get through Congress. I suspect there are many like you, like me, who probably won't move to Vermont for that very reason. But ultimately, this is a document that protects diversity. Not only diversity of background and ethnicity, but diversity of viewpoint. It recognizes and appreciates the fact that we are a diverse country. We have diverse regions around the country where people have different opinions. This protects that diversity. We also had a horizontal separation of powers, where the founders put in place 3 separate, distinct branches of government, creating a Congress that would be the legislative branch that would make the laws, making clear that the executive branch's job would be to implement, execute, carry out those laws. And the judicial branch's job would be to interpret those laws where there was a dispute that was suitable for the jurisdiction of the courts. We've drifted far from this separation of powers as well. We now have most of the lawmaking in this country done by men and women who, while well-educated and well-intentioned and hardworking, are not elected by you. And they're not even accountable to anyone who is elected by you. Last year, Congress passed about 800 pages of legislation, of statutory text. Some would say perhaps that's 800 pages too many. You want to know how many pages of new regulatory text were put out by the executive branch agencies? New laws being proposed? 83,000. So we're talking about for every 1 page of statutory text, 100 pages of regulatory text. The problem with this is there's nobody to fire. You can't fire these people at 2-year intervals, as is the case with representatives, or 6-year intervals, as is the case with senators. If they make bad laws, there's darn little you can do about it. Far too many members of Congress have become complicit in this. You would think that Congress and its members would protect the institution of Congress as the lawmaking body of the United States, but that hasn't been the case, because far too many are content to delegate that power to somebody else. They'll pass these broad, general, lofty-sounding bills that say we shall have good laws, and we hereby delegate the power to make good laws to the Commission of Good Laws. And then the Commission on Good Laws makes the good laws, and if they're not good laws, then if they come and complain to you as a member of Congress, you just say, oh, don't blame me for their regulations. I just voted for good laws. You can't blame me for that. That's a problem. So what's the solution? The solution, first and foremost, involves electing people to the United States House of Representatives and electing people to the United States Senate who revere, honor, respect, and love the Constitution of the United States. What you want is someone who's actually read it. What you want is someone who understands that when they run, after they run, if they win, after they win, when they're sworn into office, they'll be required under Article 6 of the Constitution to take an oath to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution. And that means more than simply doing whatever the courts will tolerate. You see, because the courts over the last 75 years have become complicit in all this. The courts, since the New Deal era, have been facilitating the perpetual expansion of the federal government at the expense of the states, at the expense, really, of the people. That's where the sovereignty resides, and that's where the sovereignty is eroded when the federal government expands. The courts have been complicit in this. The courts have said, as long as you abide by the very loose standards that we're willing to enforce, we're going to stay out of this. And we're going to let Congress decide how broadly Congress's authority extends relative to the states. I understand the reasoning there. I don't necessarily love it. It hasn't led to a good result. But what it has produced is a set of circumstances where most members of Congress view that signal as a perpetually green light that says there's nothing we can't do. Even when we pass a law telling you where to go to the doctor and how to pay for it, and that you have to buy health insurance, not just any health insurance, but that kind of health insurance that Congress in its infinite wisdom says you must buy under penalty of federal law. Even when Congress passes a law like that, which it has no power to enact under the Commerce Clause, the Supreme Court rewrites it as a tax in order to make it constitutional. So you've got the executive branch and the judicial branch doing the work of the legislative branch, in part because members of the legislative branch are not willing to call the constitutional shots on their own. They see the question of, is this constitutional, and will the court, the Supreme Court, tolerate it as one and the same? They're not the same. You have to read it. You have to know it. You have to love it. You have to have a commitment to it. All of that brings me to why I'm in North Carolina. From time to time, several times a week, in many circumstances, candidates from around the country will come and talk to me, seeking my endorsement for one reason or another. I'm still not quite sure why they come to me seeking my endorsement, but for whatever reason, I'm willing to indulge the conversation. Because I want to help anytime I can, anytime I can find somebody who feels the way I feel about our country, about the fact that we're special, we're a different country, we're unlike other countries, and we need to restore constitutionally limited government in order to restore upward economic mobility in America. We need to restore these things so that the poor and the middle class can get out of the traps that the big government in Washington has created for them, so that we can undo the crony capitalist privilege that we've created for many of the wealthy, well-connected people in Washington have created for themselves. This is how we restore economic opportunity. This is how we get the poor out of poverty. And this is how we help the middle class to do better, is by adhering to these principles. So when these candidates come into my office, I engage in a lengthy conversation with them. I refer to it as an interview. I'm pretty sure that most of them strongly regret walking into my office and going through it. Because I ask them all kinds of questions. I was raised in a home where we talked about this sort of thing at the dinner table. I think I was 30 before I realized that not every family discusses the presentment clause over the table. But I engage in very lengthy discussion with each of these candidates to try to find those who really have read the Constitution and are committed to its principles and want to restore constitutionally limited government. It's not very often that I find one of those candidates. I interview several each week, most weeks, and it's rare that I find one. But I found one, and his name is Brannon. In the time that Brannon sat in my office, I asked him every single question I could think of about the Constitution, and I've repeated those questions several times since then just to make sure I understood the answers. This guy has more familiarity with the Constitution, quotes it with greater fluidity and comfort, and with a more natural conviction and connection than perhaps any other candidate that I've ever seen. And I'm honored to be here to endorse him. After I completed my interviews with Brannon, I concluded it would be wrong for me not to endorse this man. He understands the document better than most lawyers that I know, and he can deliver a baby better than any lawyer. You wouldn't trust most lawyers to do that. Perhaps the only other candidate that I can think of that came close to Greg Brannon's performance in that interview was another guy that I interviewed a few years ago, named Ted Cruz. We need him.
Yes.
Please send him. There are those who have, from the outset of his campaign, said that this effort is impossible. And then they heard him speak. And they saw what people do in response to his speaking. Volunteers show up. Signs go up on lawns. Phone calls get made. And so people stopped saying that it's impossible. And then they started saying, well, it's just improbable. And then more volunteers have showed up. And more phone calls have been made. More doors have been knocked on. And what's happening is that people are seeing he's gone from impossible to improbable. And he's now going from improbable to unstoppable. I wish we had a Greg Brannon in every state. We don't. But we have a Greg Brannon in this state. We need him in Washington. I ask you, I beg you, I plead with you, please send us Greg Brannon. Send him to the United States Senate. Send him to President. Thank you very much.
That's amazing. The ride I just had from Raleigh to here has been phenomenal, but I told him this morning, I love that 30 minutes in your office in June. I love Socratic method. I saw I was trained by my mother. You can talk a good game, but you got to prepare. And we know we're in a constitutional crisis right now. We understand that because of this state coming over us in every part of our life. When our founders pledged their life, they meant it. When they pledged their fortune, they meant it. How do we know? They lost their life. They lost their fortune. When they pledged their sacred honor, they never lost it. How do we know? We gained a country. I believe that philosophical document, the Constitution, is the most crucial thing there is. Some of my opponents in the primary mock that I'm a philosophical guy. Without a core philosophical principle, what can you run back to? Either we are that document or we're not. And 11 years later, our second Constitution was placed on 6 pages, not 86,000 pages of regulations, on 6 pages to limit the federal government, not the individual. And the Bill of Rights does not grant one single right. It just declares God-given natural rights in which the federal government could never, ever infringe upon. And we saw what Senator Jim DeMint did in 2010. He stuck his reputation. You read his book about America, it's phenomenal. He said he'd not go up there just to go along, get along. He said, enough's enough. I'm there to represent this Constitution. He looked for men and women that honor their oath. Senator Lee was one of them. That class, he bought 10 men for Senate. 8 of them won, based upon one thing and one thing only, the Constitution. My opponent's backed by Karl Rove. He backed 12. 10 lost. Job. You're the employee, the employer, you're the lobbyist, you're the sovereign. I know some of you heard me say this over and over again, but these 2 questions must be asked by this generation. Who is sovereign? And what is the legitimate role of a government? Our Creator made us in His image. The great sovereign universe made us in His image. So we're stewards here. We have certain rights, among those life. From the moment of conception to natural passing and everywhere in between. There is no the potential to be what God made you in the pursuit of your dreams. And Obamacare attacks every fabric of life, liberty, and property. Legitimate government. A legitimate government is not 51% vote what happened. That's not a democracy, is a mobocracy. We are a legitimate government based upon the rule of law, a republic, where the individual is superior to the collective. That makes society at its best when the individual is in charge of their life. And that doesn't mean we're selfish, it's just the opposite. We're built upon the Judeo-Christian belief of helping your neighbor. What makes America phenomenal is that nucleus of family, of church, of synagogue, of local schools, local communities. That's the fabric of who we are. And the time of chaos is the most important time to run back to your foundational principles. When things seem all hectic, you lose your compass, you lose who you are. You got to go back to your instrument flying. When you're flying a plane in the fog, my brother was a pilot at the age of 15. If you can't see, you got to go back to what you know. That compass always points north. And our compass is our document. That's exactly in this time we have to do it. So let's get inside the hurricane, in the eye of the tornado, where it's calm, so we can actually see and reflect. Let's run back to those. They don't have the answer. We'll know the answer is no public-private partnerships.
Yes.
We'll know the answer is not Common Core or change its name. The NSA cannot have general warrants on millions of phone calls. And Dodd-Frank that destroys. Dodd-Frank, in the introduction to Dodd-Frank, it talks about the problem. The problem that causes great catastrophe was the inherent instability of the economy. No, what caused the problem was the government printing dollars out of thin air and making government mandates that they don't have any role to do. And then the salient figure of our time, the issue that's going to bond us together, this whole thing. And I read every word of H.R. 3590. It's the Affordable Care Act, which is neither affordable or health care. It may sound like I'm pointing problems out, but as a surgeon, when you see the problem, you're almost done. The problem is easy. We got it. Now find men and women with character and a backbone, and we change the world. Don't look for me for perfect. Those who read Scripture, I'm Romans 7 every day. I make mistakes every day. But I know who's in charge, and it's Him. But we have to be honest. When I fall, pick me up. When you fall, I pick you up. But we cannot fall away from the truth. And in this case, it is our Judeo-Christian beliefs that put together this document that allows us to be free as individuals. You'll never hear me say, I'll do this, even though it's not on these 6 pages. It has to be there, and we must triage our way back to those core principles. If we waver, we're never going to move. There are 2 things I will never waver on. Life. Ever. I don't care if you're 85 and need a kidney, you want one, and you get it, it's yours. You need bypass, it's yours. And I believe we could all agree, no matter what you think, that our DNA is our fingerprint of our life. Let's think back. When was that formed? The moment that sperm penetrated that egg. That zygote is another term for human being. If we can't protect life at both extremes, what are we? So we know the problems. Now let's find men and women. Now I'm going to blame one person with all our problems, and it was Greg Brannon. I abdicated my role. I didn't perform what I was supposed to do by civil duty. We must find out who's running for office. You must run for office at every level. Like I talked about, I've talked about the horizontal, the checks and balances. The vertical is the most important. that one supersedes every other one. And look who's on top of that vertical. It's the sovereign individual. That's you. Look in the mirror. That's you. So I believe we're there. 2010 was a beautiful, beautiful time. But we hear about that great Tea Party movement. The Tea Party is the conscience of our party, the conscience of our country. Tea Party leaders would be called, if they take names from the past, you would take a Madison, a Henry, but you'd also take a Frederick Douglass, a Susan B. Anthony, a Martin Luther King. They questioned the status quo because they knew they were made in God's image. Let's run to that. We have to look back at, in this day when people say good is evil and evil is good, Orwell put a phrase on that. He called it the day of ultimate deceit. In the day of ultimate deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So I'm asking you to join us and be revolutionaries. There's one last little thing I like to talk about. The last few months I've been saying this everywhere I spoke. I believe when Franklin sat for 5 months and saw Washington on the dais, on that floor, being the president of Congress, when they're discussing in Philadelphia about the new Constitution. And they're debating. If you want to know what they debated, Yates, Martin, and Madison kept notes of every single day. You don't have to guess. If you want to know what our state thought about it, we had 2 conventions. Hillsborough and Fayetteville. You could read what they saw. They did not vote to give away the individual sovereignty. But he sat there. And he saw Washington, our greatest leader. The guy was Cincinnati, the guy who did not want to do this but out of public service. He knew he must. The man who did everything he can. The man who gave down being king sat on that chair. And on that chair was engraved half of a sun. A golden sun, half of a sun. And Franklin asked that generation concerning the American experiment on republicanism, on the individual of the collective, on a caste society based upon the individual. Was that a sunrise or a sunset? They spoke loudly, boldly. Sunrise. That's why we're here. I'm 53. I will not be the generation that sit and watch the sunset. So I'm asking us right now, please join us and make sure that we put everything we have into it, our life, our fortune, but most important, our sacred honor. And I know without a doubt, that will be the second sunrise of the American experiment. Thank you very much.
Everybody, Dr. Brannon and Senator Lee will be here for about another 5 or 10 minutes. If you want to try to mingle or get back to meet those folks, everybody please feel free to take a yard sign. We've got signs by your chairs and the metal stands we've got right back over here to match up with those here in a few minutes. So thank everybody for coming and please hang around for a few minutes.
They're young. They're young.
Awesome.
I think it's coming.
Yes, I saw that. Take care of that. Greg
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'll do my best. Wait, you know, any other places in time? Yeah, you can.
This is fun too.
This thing is ending right now.
They had to write up it. They come out. No, I don't. Yeah, they have. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Today I asked him if he stood by his words. He said that he did. He said, in other words, his I like that thought. It's like, Tom Phillips has a 4-point lead over Dr. Greg Brannon today. So we're talking about right to look at that one. Yeah. Okay. You just get a little. Sure. I don't need a lot, just a little.
I just told him you were just
Yeah, but that,
Charlie, good to see you again.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
I enjoyed
thank
that. Is there any chance of getting a copy of some of that? What did I ask?
you. Yeah, I mean, the final product will be yours to keep and do whatever when it airs, and it will eventually.
Oh, okay.
So it'll always be online, so you can always go in there and
Oh, okay.
grab
That's
it.
all I need to know.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be a much shorter version. There'll be a couple of pieces, one on you, and then there'll be one on the general grouping.
Okay.
But there'll be a couple of things sometime in April. I
Now,
just
when we
don't know
do commercial, we get the whole thing, of course.
Exactly. That's the difference. We don't give you
I
anything.
figured that would, I had to ask, you know. I knew the answer
We're
already.
not allowed to give up any of that stuff. In fact, if someone wanted it, they'd have to come up with a search warrant and subpoena and all that stuff. It never works. Good to see you again.
Yeah, nice seeing you. I
Enjoyed
really
meeting you.
enjoyed that. It was
I did
fun.
too.
You guys seem to have a lot of fun.
We did.
As much as I did.
We did, certainly. So, good luck to you. Good to see you again.
All right, good. Nice seeing you.
sometimes, we don't get to. Oh, it's
And your husband's spoken on the club. Yes.
I travel maybe once. We still have little people.
Yes. Yeah, you do. I'm sure. And he's doing a great job.
I'm trying. It's a team. And that's what's How are you?
Yes, she does. This is his life.
Good, Charlie. I read your thing on the Yeah, not only that, but the one on the Board of Elections, about the staging of the, it was they're much smarter than me on that. So it was very well written.
Glad you came.
Yeah, very much.
I figured my name, remember? Yeah, make a lot of good things. Come and tell your friends.
Hey, Charlie, I got your email. Go after. Do what you gotta do.
I don't need to. Yeah, he's all I need. I'll call.
We still have house full of it sure is a whole family.
We'll get all. Oh, all of us. I mean, you can get just them too. I met your husband when he first came to Greensboro to announce.
He's talking a lot slower now, isn't he?
Yes, he's tough. 1, 2, 3. Yes, he is doing so much better.
I'm right.
She noticed.
The Ninth Amendment, you know, a bunch of stuff.
Very funny.
Every year they're down. I think it was nice of the people. Asked his name, he's actually saying, like, this is wrong, this is wrong. I mean, this is exactly what he my brief, I love this here. He was saying, this is wrong, this is wrong. You're actually the wrong well under you. You're exactly correct. That's exactly right. We'll drag home.
It really is.
We'll get it going.
Go ahead and turn over all my
You can't really believe it, and I'm not going to change everything. Rick was saying the same thing. Whatever he said, he's not telling us. He's saying this is the
Hello. I'm doing good. Remember after today. This is
It's exciting.
Oh, you will be I know you did.
But this is perfect for me.
This is little snippets. One a day on page 1. That's right. Put it in the bathroom.
Take a few, Greg. Okay. All right, let's rock and roll. Let's do it.
Oh, darn. I missed the selfie.
Where are we going?
Yes. Yeah, we gotta go.
Photo bomb, that's what it was.
Okay.
I gotta talk to Jacob. Oh, you're looking for him too?
Jody, we're gonna go to. Hey, good, how you doing?
I'm not. Shirts back. Where's
Hey, sweetie, what are you doing? Making calls to that? Yeah. I'll ask.
About doing it was lining them up.
I'll ask where the things are. Oh, he's not? Oh, okay.
I wasn't leaving. What's
You had mentioned that Dad might be interested in golfing. Can I get his email?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Get a piece of paper there.
He's got a pen.
I would so love to very important What's his name? Todd
Bless his heart.
It's Todd Haymore at AOL.com.
No, we want all these supplies to stay with you.
And I could have asked you this first. You know,
Perfect. Y'all are awesome. Thank y'all. I'm going to call him here in a few minutes.
tell them that
All right. All right. I had to hit the road. Appreciate it.
You're leading, right?
that's somebody when I was coming in.
Yeah, I got it. I'll figure it out. I'm going to put the logo, logo, honorary teenager Republican, award, presented to Congressman Howard Coble for your 30 years of service. No, I'm using the empty charge logo.
I've got a sticker for you. Here you go, Nick.
Come on. You know you want to.
No, I don't.
The only remember, I'm George. Well, and I'm George, come here. I won't do it again.
John, I'm in.
What's last?
Yeah. I know, we met. That man was named, but I'm not sure. All right. Clean this ring here.
That's the thing. That's our preference.
I want to test you. Maybe the governor sees first.
Makes a good campaign.
Let me go help them.
Yeah, it's gonna go quick. I mean, he's next to 5.5 weeks.
But, yeah, I definitely want to see that.
What are you doing with these? Just,
Well, all right, I'll just get them stacked right now. I'm gonna take a few of them with me. But I guess put some in the office.
Thanks for letting me
well, the main thing is, it's awesome that we have these here, that when somebody shows up, they can get us.
So we work hard.
I like that.
Lifetime of
That was smart.
Does he can't feel it?
So we're gonna put this back in the office.
I hadn't either. It's only playing.
Let's put them on that stack right now.
It's only
I might come and put some in my car.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a couple myself, so.
We're going to a 420 movie.
But I'm not sure.
They're right here.
Anyway,
Enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
Kids into the seats. And what we're doing for one of us is keep
A true Republican. Well, I tell you what.
I take all the neighbors from putting their green bill on.
we have so much. The big thing is teachers are
What order we need to take down here? I know we got the. They put Sunday 2 to 4 here now.
That's what we're talking about. We'll see what happens. I guess we're all learning from each other. Okay, so we'll just see what happens. I got all the phones in my notes.
The rest of it is.
We're trying to get everybody to early, start getting charged up.
Okay, all right, well, I'll be able to make it, because I'm going to work now, I'll probably work till 2 in the morning.
Have you been
I'm going outside, you know.
Where do you live?
I'm in Townsville.
I know Janet,
I mean, it shouldn't be rocket science.
no, it's not, it's not, and I'll try to mess around with it over the weekend.
It really is really simple. You just open it up with your ID, and then you press on the phone, and then the list comes up. And I've learned to actually open up the survey before I even ask them a question, because the survey tends to change.
well, the thing that's my mind.
We'll play around with it.
Because I mean, I don't call very often because I live in Townsville and my choice is Greensboro or Winston, and I'm on a limited budget.
Yeah.
But I'm doing
Do what you can.
what I can.
Well, it's all, you know, it all is part of it, it's a
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's a difference
Like you
between-
said, it's not rocket science.
Yeah, it's the difference between,
I think this big table came from over there.
Have you seen the guy with the shrimp connection in Summerfield?
Is that the thing, man? I'll never get down there.
are these art clipboards?
Yes.
Or are they?
I think they came out of the, out of our office.
One is not, one is,
I gave part back to GOP stuff.
and this.
Where's this going?
Goes back there.
Time y'all get down here?
Dan got here about 2.
Absolutely.
And I got here about 2:30. I just finished working out.
4:05, we wrapped up, 4 o'clock, 4.
So people are coming at,
Okay, all right, yeah. I understand you killed down there in Salt.
Yeah, I gotta go get some gas.
I'm telling you, if applause amounted to anything, if they didn't do a straw poll or anything,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Well, he got 69% up in Rockingham last year.
was it 69?
69%.
Wow.
The right, great.
Yeah.
Is that right? There was a straw poll, Rockingham?
Right,
Yeah, yeah,
last
yeah.
night.
Yeah, last night,
It's
yeah.
one.
I don't
I was thinking when we were up there.
Thanks, Sandy. I appreciate it, man. Yeah.
Did these go back an hour?
Yeah, I'm taking, those are mine. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
those
take
are yours.
I don't know.
Was this table here or we moved it?
It was here, leave it.
I'm gonna move it, yeah, I'm gonna move it. Lars, we can move it.
Oh, I got help.
Yeah.
My jacket.
Ann Cleaver? Ann's still here, so Ann's around here somewhere.
When's your next event here? Did you say something about Sunday or?
Yeah, what's,
They're
you know
gonna
what, that
do
is a good thing. Is anything going on here Sunday?
Best of my knowledge, no.
Okay, because me and Van can get in. I mean, all we're gonna be doing is making phone calls.
Yeah,
No problem.
that's what I was thinking, I
Yeah.
was remembering.
Yeah, we can get in. I mean,
Now, is there a wave signing deal or something?
that's next
That's
Thursday.
next
We're just gonna, and
Yeah,
I was
every
hoping
Thursday you guys
Piccarelli
are
was
doing
gonna
it?
be here.
think it's next Thursday. I can't do it. I work until 5 and I'm from working Reedsville, so it's good 30, 40 minutes for me.
Yeah.
But, I think they're doing a Mark Walker, a Brannon Wave's son. And I'm not sure, they usually do it on the corner of Battleground and,
See, that's actually too late for me because I get done work at 3.